right. Welcome to the Kansas City Artist Coalition Artist Interview Series. I am Jen Harris, Programs Director, and today we are here with Miss Adrienne Walker Hoard. And I'm going to give you her artist statement before we get started today. Adrienne writes, I am an artist, and my art is my service. I am a curious being with expertise in translating visual stories, whether in paint or photograph, in text, gemstone, or fabric. My colored forms express my interpretation of authentic stories from indigenous life and oral histories, always following the patterns. I use art as my tool and my vehicle for living life forward. My mission as an artist is to connect the viewer to the feeling of that moment in time captured through my tangible expression. For me, the visual arts express the highest form of similarity among diverse people. We can feel the humanity in one another, our aesthetic presence through the arts, and I seek to help everyone notice. My aesthetic vision is a creative composite of my lived experience as a global member of fierce female tribe of creators, enhancing their communities in several geographic areas in the United States, as well as in South Korea, Italy, and South Africa. Furthermore, Adrienne, you write, I created this series of painted photographs of dancers doing their best thing, moving perfectly fit bodies in harmony, wearing sparkly attire, and feeling good about themselves. After viewing just the photographs, I felt there was more emotion and intensity in the live image than the camera alone could capture. I needed to touch those dancers, energize their space and the spaces between them. So I touched them with paint, metallic inks, oil pastels, pens, and pencils. Then the rhythm of those bodies in motion came off the page to involve you, the viewer, in this love dance. I'm so excited about your upcoming show, which opens on March 3rd. I think you beautifully described the show. You said it's titled Love is a Body in Motion. This seems like such an extraordinary process, and I love how you've leaned into it. You write about it so poetically, so it feels like you're in love with your process, and I'd love for you to tell me about it. How did you, first of all, how did you wind up in front of these dancers with a camera?
These are the Lincoln University Dance Troupe. This is a dance company, and Teresa Ferguson is their mentor and choreographer. And even though she brings in other people from time to time, every year is different. And the costume designer is Judy LaRue. And Judy is from Kansas City, went to Paseo in art and design, just a really creative spirit, but can envision in fabric how it's going to work. She does the whole company. And so it was just, this was a couple of years ago. And I went to a couple of rehearsals, but because when I used to teach, I really enjoyed Denzel Forrester. He was just here and he talked about teaching drawing. And when I moved to New York, early 70s, and was teaching drawing, I got that book, Kimon Nicolaides. And so that was my basis. I loved movement. And so I've had dancers come to my drawing classes, just wild things, but I enjoy that movement. So I do sketches and so forth. But when I went to the concert that night and I'm sitting there and the whole thing is unfolding new, I was like, oh, wow. And I love the fact that these people had rehearsed for months together, but that night they had a certain air about them. They knew this was performance. This was no longer rehearsal. This is the real deal. And there's one of the photographs is called Sweet Strut. So this guy is dancing with this woman and she's moving in front of him and she has on a pink net flounce right on her rear end. And at that moment, he just looked down at it. And I caught that. And I laughed. I thought, you've been dancing with this woman for months. What about that moment, that pink flounce, that movement made him look down back at that flounce? I cracked up. So I got involved with these dancers. I really enjoyed the show and all of the things that I looked at in terms of how the performance brought much more aesthetic, much more movement, much more feeling from the dancers themselves. So when I got the photographs home, because it was a lot of time delay, you see the movement of these people. Like, and the framer was saying, which one? I said, the one with the three dancers. He goes, Adrienne, you don't have any with three dancers. I see four dancers in there. I said, no, no, it's really three, but one of them is moving and the other two are standing. So it was just funny. So when I saw that after, the photograph was printed, I thought, I need more. This doesn't give you everything. And some of them, because they're in motion, I felt I had to pull them out so you could really see them. They're there, but I have to kind of manipulate to bring them to the surface. And so that was the fun. That's why I said I needed to touch them, because I had to go in and use things to help pull them out with color, with pattern, and with just basic mark making with the strokes. And that's why I went to many different types of media. I didn't want to just paint, I wanted to mark as well. So
What I'm looking at this exhibition here on the screen behind our conversation, and it's just, I know exactly, I can see exactly your intention and how you translated this idea. And I'm so excited to make folks come to the gallery to look at it in person. But there's a romance to this. There's an eroticism to it. There's also just I don't know. There's an acknowledgement of this collective beauty. I feel like as I'm looking at this work, I can see your energy and theirs connecting in this kind of ethereal space between us, because there is the blurring of all these lines. There are no hard edges in what you create. Has that always been the case, or did you start in a very formal way and as a creative and work towards something that is blurred on its edges? How does your creative process work?
well, if you look behind me, this was as hard edge as I got.
That was the
Where
first thing I saw. I love it so much.
colors are, and that's really where I came from in terms of geometric abstraction. That's where I was. And when the people who influenced me, the creative people, when I left graduate school, University of Michigan, with this MFA, here I am creating these three-dimensional abstract pieces, but it's not sustainable. And unless you you have someone funding it, like your university when you're a student, and you're working for them. So I was teaching for them. So then I moved, and then I have to start thinking about, how do I do this? But I met Ed Clark, I met Al Loving, but it was Al Loving and Benny Andrews who told me to come, because I met Al Loving when he came back to Ann Arbor. He also went to Michigan for the Bluegrass Festival. And so I'm looking, who is this Black guy at this Bluegrass Festival? Let me go over and talk to him. And it was Al Loving. He goes, I'm getting ready to have this show in New York. Come to New York and see my show. And I'm like, okay, what do I know? So I had to go. And just, here are people who are doing it. Ed Clark is doing it. Joe Overstreet is doing it and putting together a gallery. And so I was like, wow, Vivian Brown. These were the women and the men who were being abstract in New York in the early 70s. And they were my mentors. And they didn't seem to mind that this little kid from the Midwest was interested. When Romeo Bearden, he wrote a letter for me, and he goes, that's why I use that word. He goes, Adrienne has a curious mind. So I thought, okay, if he thinks so, it must be so. But yes, those were the people who got me into this. These large 8-foot shaped canvases. I built them, I stretched them, I shipped them around. So I only have 2 left. But that was the time, that was the way I started. And then on the left, my left, you're right, probably, was when I lived in Italy. And then that's when things changed. I lived in Caiano in the mountains, and then I moved down in the city in Firenze. And things then became where everything moved softly into something. We didn't have hard lines anymore. Things moved softly. And I appreciated that. And then I guess the other side is, the other part of my life and mentorship was my work with the Nzanza Ndebele in South Africa. I started going at the end of apartheid. I met people who did not know. That's why I related. I'm writing a book about it. I related to American Juneteenth, because I met men and women in 1996, 2 years after apartheid had officially ended, who did not realize that they did not have to be indentured farm workers any longer. they could be self-determining. And I met people who had walked 16 kilometers, found land, created their own community because they built their own mud dung houses. And I mean, that type of creative energy to take over and reposition your life, I saw that. So between 1996 and 2013, I visited, I did things with them, and it was fun because there were a family clan is like hundreds of people. So if I worked with 8 family clans, it was interesting because people would, now these are people with no telephones, okay? I'm here visiting one aunt and she's going to send me to another auntie. So I'm driving up and maybe I dawdle, I don't go straight like 2 hours to get there. I get there in 3 or 4 hours. And she was like, "You're late. You were due here some time ago." I'm like, "Okay." Now, how does she know when I left and what was going on? But yes, so they inspired my creativity and they infused me with this kind of spark of regeneration. Keep it creative, keep it moving, because we did wonderful projects, beaded projects. If I were more organized, I'd have on one of our beaded projects today. But they wanted to change. They didn't want to do the same thing every year. They wanted to change it up every year, which was interesting because I think many of us find something we like and we want to get another one just like it, or let's get another one next year. And here are people who are constantly wanting to move on, try something new, and are confident in doing that. These are creative women. As I said, these are fierce women that I have learned from in the places that I have lived and spent time.
I think this is so fascinating. Here's my next thought is, did the work that you want to do drive you to the place that you ended up traveling to and creating, or did you travel to a place and then wind up creating? How did you come about? Because these are drastically different parts of the world with wildly different cultural expectations. Like, there's Italy is not South Africa. So how did it, did you just follow the art residencies that suited your needs at the time? How does this work for you?
I am, as I said, I'm always interested in indigenous histories. I am an indigenous person. I have Native American, I have African there over. If you're an African American, you did not originate on this landmass. You were brought here. And so you have to kind of pull that in together. But then I have a grandmother who was the Natchitoches Reservation in Louisiana. Okay, so there we have these people who met and decided, that they were going to like each other, marry, and raise children together. So that's an indigenous story in America. However, you came as I used to teach, and I had a project called Ancestral Story. You had to write your ancestral story. Where did your great grandparents come from? How did they get here? Where did they land? And I was teaching in Missouri at that time, and the same in Ohio. How did they get to this landmass? How did they get to this state, this county, this plot of land? So that's how I look at things indigenously. So when I went to Italy, I went to study the Etruscans. They were the indigenous people. They were the folks who were there when the Romans arrived. They said, "Hi, come on in. We have aqueducts. We have terrestrial planting, territorial planting. We wear togas. We have all these things and we're willing to share." And so the Romans said, "Great. We like those arches. We love that aqueduct that you've got. Show me how to do that." So the Romans had 11 city states. They put the Etruscans on there. They took all the information and then they decided, let's get rid of these people so that what? The world remembers Rome. So I was looking at these Etruscans, these kind of tan brown people, long curly hair, high butts, long legs, like, okay, let's look at them a little closer. So at that time, I was there in 93, 94. At that time, you had an Etruscan museum. You had a real place where you could go. I don't know that I went back in 2000. I did not find that place in that. Not that it hadn't moved, but it wasn't there. And so, but you had the artifacts. You could look at things and realize. And then I went to Umbria, where the Etruscans were finalized, and saw the murals where they They had gone underground. They had a whole culture underground. But the one thing the Etruscans had that the Romans couldn't stand, equality for women. Women could own land. You could leave your children something. You were a person. You had value and you could have wealth. What a concept. No. If you
Truly, even now, what a concept. Good Lord.
if you look at the Etruscan funerary statuary, the men and the women are the same size. Yes, yes.
I found a new hero today because of you. Thank you.
That's why I went to Italy. That's what I went to explore. But the series of paintings is called Etruscan Voyage because, and I have a PowerPoint about it, but that's what I went to do. I went to find out about that energy, that indigenous energy. Who were those people and what did they contribute? And so that was the whole sense of that that series of paintings. And then when I came back, I was doing a piece. I did a study I have a doctorate, an earned doctorate degree. I have to tell people, I wish it were honorary, but no, it's real. It's
Oh my goodness. I wouldn't have never assumed it was. Of course you earned it. What do you have a doctorate in?
of visual perception. And what I did I looked at how people respond to abstract images and what amount of complexity is too much for humans, and can humans find similarity in patterning? I've always been interested in the way things pattern, and so in that study, I ran a lot of African American subjects, my friends, because I'm at University of Illinois, and I'm like everybody. Come on, I have to run 400 people. You wear this. People are complaining, oh, I don't want to have to look at abstract art. I'm like, it's just a few images. I can't tell them it's 400. It's just a few images, and I had gotten some little tiny what are like uh, batik like coasters. So and then they had animals on them, and so if you came and did the study, you got a batik coaster to frame to have. And
This
so
is one beer and two slices of pizza for helping me move all day. That's what this is.
I'm trying to be aesthetic. And so in this study, a lot of my friends were saying, oh, Adrienne, I don't like this abstract stuff, but this one I could live with, or I kind of like that one. Or someone said, what if I said it speaks to me? Does that make any sense? I said, yes, yes, it makes a lot of sense because these are not art people. These are just, I've got to run these subjects. So then I started looking at the patterns. The African American subjects were making comments about the abstract paintings by African American painters. No people, nothing, just the patterning and the color selections. So then I ran this and I ran it again with just those people. And we still, even they kept finding a category of African American artists. And what if you thought these were by African American painters? Can you find some of those for me? And they're going through and sorting and putting it together. I'm like, okay, something's going on here. So my advisors said, take that cultural stuff out of your dissertation. This is science, Adrienne. You're dealing with science, and this is a quantitative degree. Take it out. So I said no. So I didn't graduate for 6 months and then it was in December. I came home and my mother said, Adrienne, take that out. All that's your data and information. Let them have their way. You'll be Dr. Hoard and you'll have that information. I'm like, okay. So
I want to fight them with you. It's so incredibly interesting to say that in the absence of human form, humans identify. We connect through the experiences that we share, even if they are abstract.
Jen, you're saying it perfectly, darling. That's beautiful. And it is true. So what I did, I got a Ford Foundation postdoc. So I went on that because I was looking at saccades, how people see. You don't see straight. Your eye is making little sweeps. These are called saccades. So I went to Northwestern to the postdoc to work with the guy who was doing the saccades. But I got pulled into the art department and I stayed with them. And it was fun because I was teaching a graduate class on how to move from figurative to non-figurative. And I used Piet Mondrian. I talked about how he did it. let's look at his process and see if we can adopt some of this. And so, or mimic some of it. So that was what I did. And then I'd gotten a job at LSU. And I told LSU I was going to take the grant. I'm sorry, I can't come. And they said, no, we're going to hire you and say, we have a professor on leave on our Ford Foundation. So when you finish your year, come on to Louisiana. I'm like, okay. You say so? So that's what I did. And when I went to Louisiana, I reran this study. This is 86 at all the Black colleges because you had HBCUs. I went to Dillard, I went to Xavier, I went to Southern, and I reran this. I said, listen, I just need 40 students, 20 art students, 20 non-art students, and I've got these cards. I want them to sort these cards and find some categories for me. And they said, okay. So they gave me a room, they gave me students, and I replicated it. So I wrote the book chapter called The Black Aesthetic, an Empirical Feeling, because I proved that these people were seeing something in totally abstract art that made them feel comfortable, but akin to, like they knew something about it. And so just when you said it perfectly, I didn't write it down, but you said it perfectly, that yes, I knew that's what was happening. So that's when I published the book chapter. I got the first data in. I didn't get to get all of the Louisiana data in because by the time the chapter was being published, I had lost my parents within 11 months, instantly, from an aneurysm and a car accident. So the book chapter is published, the data's there, the science is there, it's all there, but I don't have the replicated data because I didn't get to put it in. But yes, that's what drew me to South Africa, because I wanted to find out if there was a symbol source, a culture that used abstraction as a language. Because when I interviewed African American artists and African Caribbean artists, they use the same wording. They say, I use my abstraction as a language, it's a message. And I'm like, okay, so that's why I wanted Africa. I was very close to my dear departed Keith, who was in 1994 part of the election group that people went all over the world to come and observe this election. He went. So they had them back in 1995. And I'm floundering. I really want to figure out about this group in Africa. I'm looking all over the continent. So he comes back at Christmas and he was having dinner and he throws this book across the table. He goes, here's your symbol source, Adrienne. I said, what? And it's a book by Ivor Powell, who was a journalist on the Ndebele. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at these houses, look at these women's patterning, look at their beadwork. So I thought, I got to get there. And so that's what I did. In 1996, I applied for grants in 95. I tried. And then in 96, I cashed in my life insurance. And I went to South Africa for 6 weeks.
That's the most artistic thing you've ever said. I too have I've had a couple of 401ks, but then there's a creative endeavor I can't live without knowing the answer to, and I've got to go.
Yes, and it changed my life. I mean, that's how I started the jewelry, because I had been coming for 10, what they consider 10 winters. I go in the summer, their winters. And then 03, 03, 02, 03, 04, 02, 03, I was there. And then again, 04, 05. And so they looked at me as part, really part of the family and so forth, because they got used to my being there. So they said they wanted to give me a gift. I said, oh, okay, thank you. And they said, they live in the provinces, so I have to leave Pretoria and go up to Mpumalanga. It's a couple hours drive. And so my friend took me up there and dropped me off, and he said he'd be back. This is Wednesday. He said he would be back Sunday. Okay. So they came at midnight, and there was a 4-day initiation, but it's all about the process. You are praying for the soul of the wearer. It is a chant as they are beading, and they are sewing together beads. for this, and it's a love process. The creator gets the love and pushes it out into that piece. And I always laughed because I thought people are walking away from that table not understanding what they're once they started commodity. But this is how the process began. And it continued into commodity, which was so interesting. And one lady told me, said, baby, I don't know any other way to do it. I'm like, okay, okay. That's the process. So that was the initiation I had. And I was so 405. So when I came back in '06 and I wasn't beating, they were like, no, 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 a little more. We're going to get this done. You're going to understand this and you're going to do it. This is our gift to you. And it really was. I just didn't know, but I was teaching color theory and design. I knew about the chakra system. I thought, that's how I'll use it. I'll put gemstones together in colors for the chakras with this healing intent, this love intent. That's what I put into the jewelry. It's all gemstones, it's on sterling wire, but it's a gift from these ladies. If I had never gone to South Africa, I would not have, and spent that first 11 years directly. Then I went spottily after that. But the first 11, I was there every year. And that was their gift to me. So I love doing it. I love the creative process. I think that's a lot about what my art is. I'm enjoying the process. It makes me feel good. So I want you to feel good too. But the only thing I will correct, you said it was erotic. I'm going to say it's sensual. I'm not saying it's not erotic, but I'm going to say it's sensual because it heightens your senses of the human connection. I think it's something we need to think more about these days.
I concur. There are so many. I want to weep really at what you've shared with me. And I say this because I am, Kansas City Artists Coalition is an artists run coalition. Everybody that works there in any staff capacity has an art form that they currently or have previously participated in. And I'm a writer. I've been a poet, since I was very small. And it is the thing that has carried me through my entire adult life. It is what I do in my full-time work. And all that to say, I have such a distinct memory of meeting a friend of mine because when I looked over at the table, I watched him writing and the way that he was moving, his head, his mouth, his hand, I knew that he was reciting or working out a slam poem. I knew it without word. There was nothing audible coming from him. I did not read what he wrote, but I could tell in his motion, this is what he's creating. When people have taken my work on the page and turned it sideways and said, this looks like music. It's very interesting how this, and so I'm thinking about the way in which what you've studied and discovered is so incredibly important because it illustrates that the written language is by no means our primary or singular form of communication, that these patterns, that these all of it. We know that body language speaks very loudly because when your partner is saying some shit to you that they are not illustrating with their body language, we all know these things. So I cannot, it troubles me so deeply that your research was not encouraged to continue in the discoveries that you were making, but also I want to validate how I absolutely know what you mean and completely believe this to be a very tangible, realistic, truthful way in which humans communicate with each other. And I'm so grateful for that work, for you making that something tangible that I could identify with, because yes, I completely understand. And it makes your work have that much more depth to it. You're right. Sensual is absolutely the erotic word, or the correct word compared to erotic, because it is, I think erotic borders more on sexuality as opposed to just connection. As you said, we are in exchange and your physical presence is not the only presence of you in any capacity, right?
At the piece that I did a postcard because I wanted to get started, but the piece I used is ancestral soiree, which is an ancestral dance. But if you look at this guy, in my mind, he came from a long way to get to this woman. He there's a mask on him. He comes from a different place to get to her, but she is there with open arms saying, yes, I'm waiting for you to get here. So that's why I liked that piece, because they have something. There's a connection between them that we're not even aware of, but they are aware of it. And I think that's the whole thing about partnerships. People look at different relationships or marriages and say, I can't imagine how that works. But the people inside it are ecstatic. So, it's all about understanding and giving space for different understandings. I know you're a writer, Jen. You put everything so perfectly. So when I get time to sit down and write my book, will you be one of the first readers?
Oh, please count me in, Adrienne. Count me in anytime you need me. You have my number. I'm happy to participate and grateful. Thank you so much for this conversation today. It's truly an honor, and I'm so excited to see your exhibition at Kansas City Artist Coalition. It opens March 3rd through the 31st. We're hoping to have you there for some remarks if you are available. And I hope that everybody will join us for this opening. So thank you for this brief glimmer into your wildly exciting life. I really appreciate your time today.
Arjun, thank you. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I'm very honored to be with KCAC. You all are such a blessing to the community. Thank you.
Thank you.